out that they're grateful for their health. Because we know that experiencing gratitude can positively impact both your mental and emotional state. It gives us a sense of calm and also a sense of purpose. And I see people posting in the chat, they're grateful for their job, they're grateful for their family, they're grateful for the things that are going well in their lives. I thank you so much for pointing that out and sharing that in the chat box. Kids, health, home. And we know that studies indicate, and my wonderful colleague talks about this frequently, that when research has been conducted on what gives us a sense of purpose and happiness, it's not monetary objects, it's not material things, it's actually a loving family and friends. So thank you so much for sharing. Next slide. So the objectives for today is we're going to talk about social emotional learning. We're going to talk about understanding what social emotional learning means. We're also going to develop an understanding of how social emotional learning impacts academics, motivation, emotions, relationships, and behaviors. And more importantly, we're going to learn about the skill sets of social emotional learning and how parents or guardians can help support their children's growth in this very important area. Next slide. When you get a chance, and if you have your phone readily available, please take a picture of this. We're not going to go into too much detail with this bunny breathing, but when you get a chance, when we talk about gratitude, breathing exercises, we will do one later on during this presentation. We also like to share resources with you guys that you can use for yourself and then also use with your children. So this is a wonderful exercise, breathing exercise that is available through Go Noodle. And we find that when our children are feeling dysregulated, it's very important to just stop and help them breathe so that they're able to take stock of what's going on and they're able to engage in problem solving. Next slide.
So I just wanted to add, thank you for putting it in the chat, the gonoodle.com. So that is free for like any educator and also for parents. And it does have wonderful different videos on mindfulness, on managing stress. And so I pulled that off of the managing stress one, and they have it in English and Spanish. Really wonderful little things that you could do and sit with your child. And once again, it just reinforces that grounding and those exercises. And we're going to talk more about that, how that is all a part of social emotional learning. So then we ask the question, what does that mean? We might hear that a lot. SEL, social emotional learning, they incorporate it a lot into schools, into classrooms. And basically, it involves the process through which children and adults acquire and apply knowledge and skills that are necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals in their lives, feel and show empathy, right, and compassion for others, establish and maintain positive, healthy relationships with others, and make responsible decisions. So these are all of the things that it can support, social emotional learning. Next. So what does SEL have to do with learning when we hear that? How does it tie into it? Well, studies have shown that social emotional instruction can lead to improvements in these following areas: in attitudes, motivation, and commitment. So this is really a positive thing, right? If it can help our children and adolescents have better or higher motivation to succeed. It also, when studies have been done, it shows that it can lead to improvements in performance, grades, and subject mastery. So increases in their achievement and also behavior. Their studies show that it really helps support that participation and study habits as well. So this is how it can all tie in together with learning. And this is why it is really important to talk about SEL. Next. And so now we want to look at kind of what shows up. It says, based on many studies, it says that when it's implemented in the classroom, the social emotional kind of curriculum with students, that it shows on average, 83% of these students benefited in some way and showed academic gains, with an average, the student increasing their academic achievement by 11%. So if you look at that, 83% is a really large number. So it does show that when we apply our social emotional learning curriculum, like consistently in a routine manner, that there's a really, what would I say, that just shows such progress, at least an average of 83%. So that is wonderful to hear, right? It does help our students in their growth. Next slide. So we also look at our school district, LA Unified, we measure the social emotional competencies, and we're going to talk about what these competencies are. We are looking at growth mindsets, self-efficacy, which means the ability for a child or adolescent to believe that they can accomplish a goal, so to believe in themselves, social awareness, and self-management. And we're actually going to go through each one of these separately. Next slide.
So we're going to start with growth mindset. And what does that mean? It's a big word, right? So it might sound a little confusing. Essentially, what growth mindset means is it's the skills that promote success in interpersonal, and cognitive abilities. It's what gives us a sense of being able to accomplish things, right? It's the belief in one's ability that can grow with effort. Let me give you an example of how that can be promoted at home. It's the focus that we, or the encouragement that we provide children when maybe they're feeling like they might not be able to do well in math or an area that they're struggling with. So an example of growth mindset, it would be to focus on the effort and not necessarily on the outcome. And we know what happens over time when there is that encouragement, then that child will feel like they will be able to become better at math or whatever subject they might be encountering. Because we know that through hard work, good strategies, and help from others, talents can be developed, right? We know that for self-efficacy to happen, someone has to be able to master whatever skill they're working on. Next slide. This brings us to self-efficacy. It's the belief, as I mentioned, in one's own ability to achieve an outcome or goal, or being able to do something that we previously didn't think we would be able to do, right? And so there are many ways that we can promote that with our children by giving them opportunities to succeed. And when maybe they don't reach that goal, giving them that sense of encouragement that next time things might work differently if they make an effort. We also recognize self-efficacy by recognizing strengths in and mobilizing positive feelings about self, school, family, and support networks. We know that when a child is encouraged and they're reassured, they feel better about themselves. That helps internalize that message that things can go better, right? And that positive outlook will be very helpful for them in the future when they are encountering difficulties. And another aspect of self-efficacy is knowing one's needs and values. So helping children and adolescents understand what their needs and what their values are, especially as they grow, as they become more independent from their parents. How can they develop that sense of healthy sense of entitlement where they are able to voice their needs and also develop their own value system? Next slide. The next skill set that we want to focus in terms of social emotional learning is self-management. So what does that mean? And in the graphics here, you see a young girl doing meditation, kind of like what we were talking about, the gratitude and the bunny breathing. Essentially, that's what helps promote self-management, which is the ability to be calm, the ability to self-regulate our emotions. If we're feeling, for instance, angry, how can we help children, for instance, identify that feeling and to be able to manage it, right? Because we want to be able to control those emotions, thoughts, and behaviors and communicate them in a healthy way, right? We also want to teach children how to control their impulses and aggression, right? Especially when they're very young. Sometimes they struggle with that. So how can we help them with that, right? And one way is by breathing. Another way is by thinking about what things are going well in their lives so they have a more balanced perspective. Also, activating hope and optimism. When we mean about activating hope, it doesn't mean that we're saying that everything is going well when it's not. It's not a Pollyanna perspective. On the contrary, it's saying, I know that X, Y, and Z might not be going well for you, but these are the things that I can do to help you get through this. We also, when we talk about self-management, we focus on tasks, right? What can we do now so that you can feel better? And also managing personal and interpersonal stress. And this is when loving adults and caring guardians and parents can help their children come up with solutions should their child be experiencing difficulties with a peer at school. How can they start activating that problem-solving ability so that when they become older, they're able to access those skill sets? Next slide. So now we are going to guide you in a breathing activity. It's called Square in the Air. This is actually an exercise that Monica and I frequently use with classes when we are responding to a crisis or a difficult situation. This is what we model, and we actually do use it with, right, when we are having difficulties, because we know that when someone is agitated, they're not able to access their problem solving. So I'm going to walk you through these steps. And as you see, you can either look at the picture or you can even use your finger and draw a square in the air. So what we're going to do, and I'm going to model this for you, we're going to breathe in for 4 seconds. You're going to hold that breath for 4 seconds. You're going to breathe out for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds, and then again, we're going to start breathing in for 4. So if you feel comfortable, you can either draw with your finger as I'm giving you the instructions, or you can even close your eyes and visualize that square in the air. So let's start. So we're going to breathe in for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Once again, breathe in for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4 seconds. And then I'm wondering if anyone wants to maybe write in the chat how they're feeling. How are you feeling, Monica? Let me ask you.
I feel like it really helped relax me. Every time we do this, it's like there's just some kind of grounding with it.
Thank you so much, Monica. I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you. So once again, like Veronica said, these are such simple things you can do with your child, right? When you see them feeling anxious or overwhelmed, or they're having a hard time, before we can do any kind of like homework or reasoning, we really need to be first grounded. So if you see that going on, you can simply say, let's do our breathing together and try to help, like we talk about, get that calming attitude and that emotional regulation that they need. Next. Before they can begin all their tasks with work and academics. So one of the other competencies is social awareness. And this is the ability to empathize and understand social norms, right? Appreciating diversity, the similarities and our differences from others, being able to accept people. And like we said, just build that awareness and acceptance, building relationships, and also learning how to work cooperatively with others. And how many of us as parents and caregivers, like that's our goal for our children, right? We want them to understand others, to accept others, and anyone that has differences or disabilities or anything like that. We want them to be sensitive. And it always starts by talking to our students and teaching them this as young kids, and going over that with them. This is how they can grow up in that comfortable manner of knowing this is what's expected, and I need to be sensitive and kind to others and think about others and generous. So this is all about social awareness, where we're working on listening carefully and accurately to what someone is saying, right? And I feel like we always practice these skills, or we try to as adults too, right? This is something we all work on. How many times when you're talking to someone that it's the most important thing that they're actually really listening to you, right? And sometimes how do we know when they're really not? When we're talking to someone and we feel like they're on their phone on the side, or so these are skills that even as adults we need to keep working on. Or how many of you go out with your children as a family and you're out to dinner and everybody's on their technology tool, someone's on the iPad, someone's on their phone, and you think about it, that's something that we have to be aware of, like our social graces and manners, and realizing that, see, that's not kind of like a positive way to spend time together and really connect. So it's always good to kind of remind ourselves of this in relation to one another, and how it is important to listen, to put down things sometimes when we're having dinner, or we're trying to have that quality family time, and to just be present, right, with intentionality. All of that is so important, and just showing respect to one another. And so these are just some of the things that we want to be aware of about social awareness. Next slide. And so there are some helpful tips. Sometimes you might be wondering, well, how can I help as a parent? Like, what can I do for my child? How can I support them in their social emotional learning and their awareness and their development? And so we're going to talk about that. What things can we do as parent and caregivers? One of the most important ones that I was going over, and it was to really be a good listener. To sometimes with parents, we are so into like wanting to help our children and maybe telling them what we need them to do, that we forget to stop ourselves and just really listen to what they have to say about their day at school, share their feelings. And we know this can be harder sometimes as our children grow up. And I know you guys can attest to this. When they become adolescents, it's even more with more intentionality that we have to find ways to connect with them, because a lot of times that's a natural developmental phase where they're sort of separating from their parents and really connecting to peers. So we still have to find that way to find out how they're doing, and with intentionality to kind of engage in that. We also want to model that behavior that we seek, right? So if we want to teach our kids that when we make mistakes, that it's okay to actually apologize. So we teach them about forgiveness. Some of these just basic things. And so you can just imagine sometimes you've had a really long day and maybe you're trying to make dinner and you're doing 20 things, and then one of your kids comes in and you accidentally like, oh, I'm just so busy right now, I don't have time. And then you catch yourself. It's really okay to say, I'm so sorry. Mom is just really busy right now. I'm sorry that I got a little short with you. It is really important to role model to our kids how to say, I'm sorry for something, and to kind of show that respect and kindness. You also want to nurture their self-esteem through giving them responsibilities and helper roles, right? Because you want to allow them to make choices. I mean, I know a lot of you in here are really good at like baking with your kids or giving them tasks to do, because it does give them that little sense of feeling like responsible, like a little leadership role. So just remember that. Well, Veronica was talking about that earlier, that self-efficacy. That's how we build their confidence, is by having them do things that they can master, right, and achieve. And so we want to show our appreciation when they do a job that's well done. We want to praise them, do a lot of nurturing. And one of the other things is we want to respect differences. We want to, with our children, we want to resist the urge to ever compare, right, our children to one another. We want to always remember that each of our children have unique gifts and talents, and we need to make it our job to encourage and help them blossom into what those talents are, right? We might have one child that's great at academics and math, and then our other child is an amazing sports athlete. So there's just different gifts that we want to create and show the potential that they have in their growing. And then one of the other things is encouraging kindness and sharing. Right? These are one of the I think just a really important value to do when our kids are young, and talk to them about that. And how do we feel? Right? I always would use that with students I'm working with. Always put yourself in someone else's shoes. If someone was treating your sister like that, or your brother, how would you feel? It really gets them to think about that sometimes in terms of their actions. And then you want to work on finding ways to stay calm when you're upset, right? So we want to role model that, like going over those breathing exercises or taking a little break for ourselves. Like if we feel really short and we're just exhausted, we might need to say, guys, I'm just going to go in my room for about 5 minutes, get a glass of water, and then I'll be back out. Sometimes we need to teach them that it's okay to take a little break and a little time out to gather ourselves together. And we want to ask our children, how do you feel? It's so important, especially right now with re-entering back to school, right? There's just so many things they're going through. And I know you might be feeling worried about them and the day, and they're coming home tired and all the different things you're concerned about. But just spend that time with them and say, how did the day go? What were the good things that happened today? Was there any concerns? So you get them to start communicating, right? And sharing and realizing that that's something that's completely normal in our homes to talk about our feelings. So these are just some of the things you can really start to do as a parent. Next slide. And then there's things to reflect on. You want to consider the perspective of others in your interactions, right? I feel like that's so important to teach our children that not everybody thinks alike. And so you talk to them about that. There's going to be people that have different opinions, different thoughts, and that's okay. And we want to talk to our children about when they give their word to follow through, right? And that's something, like we said, everything that we're asking our children to do, we should be looking at ourselves and making sure, are we also modeling that behavior, right? And holding ourselves accountable for the things that we're asking our children to do. So it's important to take a moment to reflect when you are stressed or overwhelmed. I kind of want to ask you guys to share in the chat, what is one of the things you feel like is so important for you to teach your children about some of the things we just talked about in terms of kindness to others, respecting, being a good listener to others, being gentle or accepting others? What do you feel like is one of your goals as a parent that you may talk to your child about on a regular basis and want to instill that particular value in them? Please feel free to write it in the chat. Good. And when we talk about the golden rule, do you want to say what that is, Veronica? That's so important.
Most definitely, it's treating others how we want to be treated, right? Which is, it's very simple, but it's such an important lesson to give our children.
Yes. And I always feel like that's something that we're both social workers. So in our work at schools, that's something we would constantly do, is I would have that actually on my wall in a really big print. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And I feel like that was always something very affirming for the students to see, because once again, it brings us back to us. Like, you always want to remember when you're going to behave a certain way, how would I want to be treated, right? Would I want someone to be kind to me? Just like, for example, if your child's at lunch and they have a group of friends and they see someone sitting maybe alone, to reach out to them, right? Those are all social skills. Hey, do you want to join us for lunch? Come on and have a seat with us. And I would talk to I have 3 daughters. I would talk to them constantly about that, to be sensitive and look and see who may be at need when you're at school, and to build those friendships and to build that compassion for others. And so it really is important to start when they're young. And so these are just some of the things we wanted you guys to think about, and to, like we said, consider the perspective of others and following through on our word. Next. And now we're going to look at supporting success in school. So we talk about when children are completing work and they have a routine in place, a quiet place if possible. It's so important to make sure that we have that. And it can be really hard, especially if we have multiple kids and we're also trying to do something at home on Zoom, and they're trying to do their homework, to everybody to find their own little spot to do their work. But it is important. And we know that focusing on the value of learning and academics and getting along, how your child feels, and kind of share what you have done and learn from all that, and even in your own experiences, because I think that's a good way to teach our children, to talk about maybe things that were challenging for us. And I know I was sharing this with Veronica, sometimes it's about how we perceive things, and we kind of share that with our children. Like, for example, I always give this example. For example, you have a child of yours that feels like the don't like math. They come home and they're, I can't stand math. Math is so hard. And then you find yourself saying, I remember when I was a kid, I hated math too. And so you kind of start getting on that, like a little bandwagon with them. Yeah, math is terrible. I never felt good at it. I know I like reading and you like reading, but I feel like sometimes we need to catch ourselves and we need to have that growth mindset. This is what we talked about earlier, to say something to our child like, I know math can be difficult, but let's both be open to math. Let's try to expand our thinking about math. Let's ask for help. Let's see if we can connect you for tutoring. So I think it's sometimes how we say things to our kids too that is very impactful. And so I kind of wanted to share that because I know I would find myself, before I learned about some of this growth mindset, saying certain things that I might have gone through growing up. And so sometimes it's easy to repeat that to your kids. And then we have to remind ourselves, actually, no, there's a better way to try to say that so they can be more open if they're having a challenge, like with reading or math. And then once again, listening, right, without trying to solve a certain problem. Sometimes we need to kind of, and Veronica's going to go over that about problem solving. We need to be listeners and say, how do you think you would, before we just jump in, how do you think you might be able to handle that? Like if they're bringing up a peer issue or something that happened. So we want to get them to communicate and work on their verbal skills and sharing their thoughts. Because once again, one day they're not going to be with us under our wings right at home. And so we're trying to help them build that self-confidence and those communication skills. So you want to ask them gentle questions to encourage them to explore like possible solutions on our, what do you think you can do about that? Why do you think your friend might be feeling that way? To try to help them just expand their thoughts and their feelings. And then you want to encourage effort as a way to accomplish mastery. So sometimes it's not always about the final product, right? We talk about that, Veronica and I, about how we have to focus on effort. You know, I am so proud of you. You have worked so hard. And maybe they were so focused on getting an A in their algebra class, but they brought a C home, but you know, they took tutoring classes and that was just so difficult for them. So we would want to really say all that effort you put in is what I'm looking at, and I'm so proud of you. So just to remember some of those things with supporting success in school. Next slide.
And so how can parents help? So again, it's going through the problem solving steps, listening, what our children are encountering, right? And guiding them through these following steps. First of all, identifying and defining the problem. What is the problem? What is the actual problem? List possible options and alternatives. Evaluate the options. Make a plan and do it. And then evaluate the problem and solution. And when we do this, we're helping our children grow in many different ways. We're encouraging them to look outside of themselves, to try different things, and to take ownership over their problems so that, again, when they grow or as they grow, they're able to access those problem-solving abilities and that they're able to resolve their own problems. Because we know that problem solving is something that they will need to have for the rest of their lives, right? We know that things come up as part of life. So how can we help them have a more ease with confronting problems and also solving it? And this is especially important for children or adolescents who are anxious. Sometimes they come up with so many different scenarios. And one of the most calming ways to address or to cope with that anxiety is by helping them sit with those feelings, breathe, and just go through this whole process of problem solving. And that will definitely help them manage anxiety, right? And feel like they are empowered to do so, and that they have the skill set to have solutions for their problems. Next slide. We also want to share some wonderful resources that our district has. This hotline, which is the Student and Family Wellness Hotline, was developed at the onset of the pandemic. And what we found, actually, Monica and I were two of the people manning the hotline. And so we found out that after the pandemic, parents had a lot of questions, right? And they needed answers. And so this wonderful resource is available to parents and community members as well. And so the number is 213-241-3840. It's available Monday through Friday. In addition to mental health, which the people who do respond or do answer the hotline are all clinicians. They're all clinical social workers. Many of them are licensed, so they can help with questions that parents might have around mental health, about their child, or even about themselves, right? So that the parents might need a resource for therapy for themselves. So that's something that is available through the hotline. We also have immunization information, as well as health, insurance, food, housing, enrollment, and more. It is a wonderful, wonderful resource, and we really recommend that if you are encountering a situation where you might need resources of any type, even if the resources are not available through the hotline per se, you can call the hotline and they'll make sure that you're linked with the appropriate resource. Next slide. And this is when we open it up for questions. And I think there's a few questions. Monica, you want to start with the Q&A? You're on mute.
The first one says, any recommendations for students having difficulty making friendships? That was one of the questions.
So we find that, especially after the pandemic, some students or some children might need a little bit of more help with building those relationships. What we find for those children or even adolescents who are a little shy or maybe anxious about being around others, especially peers, is having structured activities, right, Monica? Like maybe doing yoga or maybe doing games with other people or with other peers that are already structured, so that they don't have to wonder about how they can or come up with a more spontaneous interaction, because that's often the crux of the anxiety. Children or adolescents who are shy worry so much about saying the right thing and not being spontaneous. So when you have these structured situations, that in itself can be a containment for that anxiety, in that there's already like rules or guidelines around that activity. What do you think, Monica?
No, I think that's excellent. And sometimes we need to talk to our children, like if they're telling you, what, I feel really shy at school and I haven't been able, maybe it's new school, to open up and you can talk to them about it. Let's practice. Let's role play. Like, how would that be if you walked up to a little group of kids and said, hi, my name is, just kind of go over some basics, like with social skills. My name is so-and-so. How are you doing today? Is this available to sit here? Different kinds of questions to start building rapport and connecting to others. Because I think that's, like Veronica said, that's always a child's, one of their biggest fears is, what is everybody thinking? And just continuing to talk to our children, like, and there's going to be kids that are going to be really open, and we're just going to have to not take it personal if somebody is behaving a little differently and maybe not as open. So kind of teaching them not to take it so personal and to realize that it's practice, right? Building friendships and having social skills. One of the other things that was in there that I saw was about teaching their child about identifying their feelings, like how important that they would like them to learn how to do that. And I think that's you could Google, Veronica, like literally Google feeling identification charts. They have them in English, they have them in Spanish, and that's a great little tool to start when your child is it depends, from their ages all the way up to adolescence. But when they're having a hard time, it's really important to say, hey, how do you feel right now? And maybe even show them those visuals so they can point to it. I'm so angry right now. It's okay for us to be angry sometimes. So we want to help them learn how to verbalize how they're feeling instead of holding it all in, right? Which can lead to other difficulties because they're not voicing how they feel. So it's important to dialogue, sometimes and to kind of normalize it. Sometimes we all go through that. Sometimes I feel tired. Sometimes I feel angry, and to kind of model, but it's okay to talk about it. It's important sometimes that you get that out and that you share it. But having a feelings chart that they can point to sometimes is really a helpful tool to develop that. Anything else around that, Veronica?
No, excellent answer, Monica.
Let's see. It says, how can you help your child if they are having a hard time in the morning staying in school? You want to touch that one, Bill?
Yes, and that is something that is happening frequently, right? And we're finding that with elementary school students in particular. We know that when students, especially elementary school students, start school, they frequently have what we call separation anxiety, right? And that in itself is normal, right? Especially for those students who are maybe this is their first school experience. So it's not unusual. So please understand that that is something that happens. And that in itself is a sign that that child has a healthy attachment to their parent. They love their parent, that they're afraid of leaving them, right? So it makes sense. What we find, there is something that's called best practices, and there's several things that might be helpful. In particular for those students who've never been in a school setting, they need to be socialized, right, to learn those routines. Or because of the pandemic, they haven't been in a classroom setting or at school for the last 16 months or so, right? So there's a few things we can do. One of the things that parents or guardians can do is that the night before, or even like a week before, they can start preparing their child to the return to school by talking to them about what feelings they might be having about being back at school. Right, Monica?
Mhm.
Having a routine and structure is so important because that in itself, again, it creates a sense of containment. So that means that the night before, for instance, the child could be getting their outfit ready for the next day. And so that means that they're emotionally also preparing for the next day of school, right? For very young children, sometimes having a photo of their parent or guardian can be also very calming for them. So if they start feeling anxious, mom or dad or the guardian can say, you can look at my picture, and then also making plans of what might happen at the end of the day. So what happens with separation anxiety is that children become very worried for their safety and the safety of their parents, and they think that they're not going to see their parent, right? So when we talk to children about what plans might be in place after school, it gives the children or the adolescents a sense that I am going to see my parents. So that fear I have is actually manageable because I'm going to see them. Along with the picture or photo, maybe some other transitional object that brings that sense of calm to that child. It could be, something that is tactile, that is calming. It could be something small that they can put in their backpack. So those things can be very helpful. How about Monica? What do you think, Monica? What else might be
No,
helpful?
I think those are great things. And also when we're talking about routine and all that, there are so many cute books, right? Child books out there in English and Spanish about going to school. And so kind of helping to prepare and sitting with your child, that's quality time, right? And reviewing, sitting and reading a book together. I used to do that all the time and buy the age appropriate books for my girls about going to school and just getting them excited and looking, this is going to happen. And there was even little pages on sometimes we might get worried, and then it'll talk, but then I get busy and I'm doing activities. So sometimes books are a really helpful tool. There's also wonderful little songs. I know I would sing certain songs to my kids and about dropping them off and how mommy always comes back. There was this cute little song about that. And so they got used to that routine when I pick them up and we'd always sing, see, I told you, mom or dad always comes back. We're never going to forget you. So all that just gives them that reassurance that can start getting internalized. So those are just some like extra kind of, I guess, tips in looking at how you can support your child if you do feel like they're nervous, and then validate it. Veronica, say, I know it's a really hard time right now. We've all been at home for a really long time. So everybody's going through that right now in trying to branch out, and just tell them, and you're just being so brave. I'm so proud of you. And just keep praising that. Any, like we said, any of these tasks that they're doing and going to school it's a huge feat right now. And we're just so proud of all of them. So we need to say that out loud and encourage them, right? And they need to see that if we feel anxious, a lot of times they pick up on that. So you want to kind of look at your own anxiety. And if you're really having a hard time, it's important too for you to find people to talk to and make sure you're having outlets for your stress. So Veronica, like with exercise or walking, reading, things like that can help you stay grounded too, because it's totally normal for you to feel that way after all this time. I feel like everybody was so clustered at home so closely, and everybody got so interconnected and attached. It is sometimes hard to go back to the routine of separating. So those are just some other things. I know somebody was saying about What if a child has a hard time opening up to you? You might want to talk to your kids and they might be different. You might have kids that express themselves and some that are really quiet. I always feel, Veronica would agree with this. Sometimes it's important to do things like a little parallel process to maybe where you're not sitting right in front of them and saying, how do you feel right now? Veronica, sometimes kids get really like, what? Like they're not comfortable with that. So when you do things through play, find something to do with them, play a game. It really is a distraction. And then during the game, so tell me about that. And a lot of times they'll just start opening up because they're doing other things, or you're drawing together, baking together. So, or even sitting side by side watching a television program, it can start a little dialogue where they feel more comfortable and less intimidated about staring mom or dad in the eye, you know, and talking to them directly. So those are just some other tools. If you feel like your child has a hard time, like just opening up, like and sitting right in front of you, you might have to do it in a different way. Anything else, Veronica, on that?
No, I think it's great because the message sometimes is more important than the action, right, Monica? So even if the child or the adolescent doesn't open up, they know that the parent or guardian is available to them and that they're able to have that conversation with them whenever that child is ready, which is what frequently happens, is that sometimes it takes a lot of propping and a lot of encouragement before that child or that adolescent opens up. And that's okay. You follow their lead. Sometimes it's just them knowing that you are able to be there whenever they're ready to have that conversation.
There's one in Spanish, Veronica. I don't know if you want to read it.
It's essentially kind of like what we talked about in terms of when what happens when right now a lot of students are creating their social cliques, right? And then that child or that daughter might feel like she can only be part of one clique. And so mom is always encouraging her daughter to talk to everybody, right? So not to be so selective. So she's able to associate or socialize with a very varied group of people.
That's really good advice. To stay open, like we're talking about, be sensitive, stay open. And it's okay to have different friends, right? Other groups of friends. And that is important to tell your kids that it's okay. We don't have to just have one small group. We can spread out. And if we're involved in different activities, sometimes that happens. We might be in a sport, we might be in band too. We might also like, some kind of a reading group. So there's just different things, and tell them that it's okay. You have a personality filled with all kinds of strengths and hobbies. And sometimes we need to be able to tell them that it's okay to not just stick with the same little group. I think we covered all the questions. Thank you guys. Those were excellent questions. Oh, Veronica.
Yes, awesome questions.
You guys are, yeah. It says, how do you follow the lead?
Yeah, we get that all the time, right, Monica? The last question.
Yes. It says, you want to touch on that?
So how do you follow their lead when they don't open up to the parent, yet in school they have a different personality, very outgoing, excellent academic grades, but once in a different personality with a different personality at home, I imagine, right?
You get the safe child that feels like they can be, right, Veronica, and be
right.
Cranky with you. That's what's happening. You get that child that's like, I'm with mom and dad now. I can be myself.
Because they know that at home, they have your unconditional regard. They have your unconditional love. So they don't have to be someone else, right? And at school, we frequently see that, right? So that in itself is an intrinsic motivator for them, right? So they're going to be completely different. They're going to try harder. They're going to be different, right? And so I think it's very important to not personalize it, because especially as we enter adolescence, where students pull away from mom and dad or their guardian and they start individuating, sometimes there's that push and they're kind of pushing that loved adult away from them. And that's part of that normal development. And it can be very painful for parents, but just reminding yourself that it's not you that they're rejecting, is that they're developing themselves as an individual.
And then, like, if you say they're really having like a really negative attitude, and then that's something we have to talk to them about, right? Mm-hmm. As parents, like if they're, just being defiant or mm-hmm. really inappropriate comments, that's something as part of our job. Oh, we don't talk like that, mm-hmm. We don't say words like that. And so if they're being very rude to you and you almost feel like it brings a lot of sensitivity and you are being tearful about it, like someone's pointing out, sometimes we have to talk to our kids and sit down with them and say, hey, listen, you know, when you say these words and you voice it like that with an angry tone and you say that word, that really hurts my feelings. You know, and I'm a person. Sometimes I think kids think like mom and dad, we can just tell them,
Oh,
but we have to say that, Veronica, you know, that really hurt my feelings when you
yeah.
said that. And I would appreciate if you kind of recognize that. We have to teach our children how to treat us as
Yeah.
well, right? It's so important.
Because regardless of what stage they might be going through, right, Monica, it's not an excuse not to treat others with respect, especially their parents.
Yes.
And it can be very painful. And so that becomes a teachable moment in itself, right? And
Mhm.
you're also drawing a line about what is acceptable behavior.
Mhm. It's important. Thank you guys. Wow, you guys
Thank you
done.
so much, so
Thank you
much.
for having us.
And I want to hand it off to Ana Martinez.
Anna.
Thank you. And I took a lot of notes because one of the thoughts that really resonated with me, it's not taking it personally or individualizing, right? The treatment, because just like you said, that our children can come home exhausted. Maybe they didn't have a good day and they might project that. And we think, oh, did I do something wrong? Or did I say something wrong? And then, so I took notes. And one of the other things that I want to say that as a teacher, I had journals for the students, and we had every day we would take time to take out our journal. And if they wanted to draw, because a lot of times we tell children, write, you keep a diary or write. And sometimes children might want to express feelings through drawing or doodling or having Play-Doh, or so having outlets and ways of teaching our children how to communicate with us, how to express those feelings. For me, I have to say that, and a lot of times we don't want to show let our children know that we cry. Like we can cry in the car or we cry in the restroom, but showing like, okay, now I'm crying because I'm feeling sad and I'm feeling sad for this reason. And sharing with her, it's okay to share our emotions when I'm excited, when I am, and I show the children like, okay, so when you win a trophy or you get a certificate, how do you feel? And then when you fell down, how do you feel? And just giving them scenarios for them to talk about, oh, I remember when this happened, this is how I felt. And I think that's also having those conversations every day. I know when I get home, my first question is, Mom, how was your day? and they could and they could just see, right? We can talk about, oh, it was really busy and I did A, B, and C, and I think that that's what our children are trying to connect. And giving them time, like I would tell my daughter, well, give me a minute. I need to do this first, and then I'll get back to you. But one of the things Monica said that really also resonated with me was having that conversation with our children where we're being intentional about, I'm giving you my time, right? And it's either going to be through I'm looking at you, the body language, right? Because if I'm on my phone and I'm listening to you, then the message is you're not giving me that individualized attention. You're not looking at me, or your body's not, like you're doing multitasking, and you might not be, the child might not feel like, oh, are you listening, or are you hearing me? So kind of those practices that
we have to recognize that, right? Or you promise you're going to watch a movie with them, but you're on the side on your phone. My kids will tell me, Mom, you said you were going to spend time, so I have to and we put it away. We have to just kind of recognize that, right? With intentionality, being present in the moment.
Yes. So the last thing I'm going to say, and I don't know, Javier, if you want to add something, is I heard this family that had a basket. So they had like a little basket, or they had all their devices went into this basket during family time or during conversation time. So that meant, especially for us as adults, because we think we can bend the rules, right? We can. So having that basket just really helped everybody to create that space for, okay, all devices are off, or they're going to be muted for even if it's 5 minutes, right? Whatever that time lapse might be. And then we're gonna do either, we're gonna play Monopoly, or we're just gonna talk about our day, or we're gonna have dinner. Even that, right? Like a rule in my house is, if we're having dinner, no devices on the table, please. So
good.
just having those, I want to say, either structures in place to help and facilitate that conversation in the family. So Javier, were you going to add something?
Yes, I did want to add something, and thank you, Monica and Veronica, for a wonderful presentation. Thank you, Ana, for running the Zoom. I did want to say, as a parent, and we're all parents, that I had a rule. I have one child who's now grown up, gone off to college and moved out, but we had a rule every day that when we got together, he had to tell me 2 things that he learned in school and at least 1 or 2 things that he had fun doing. And it wasn't, nothing. Because a lot of times you could ask your child, what'd you do in school? Oh, nothing. And it was a rule that he had to tell me 2 things, and 2 things that he enjoyed or had fun with. And this might go along with answering the friendship question, where a child has difficulty making friends. And I did encourage him to say nice things to people. Just compliment someone on, oh, I really like the way your new haircut looks, or I really like the way your sweater, that new sweater, or you have a very nice smile. And if you teach kids kindness and you teach them to be nice to others, the friendships might flourish from there. It's sometimes kids don't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could even practice that at home with each other. Just have them, you compliment them first. Oh, I really like the way you tied your shoes, or I really like the way you buttoned your shirt, or whatever it is. If you can say something kind and nice to your child, and then tell them, I want you to take this to school with you today. Say it to your teacher, say it to another child that you may not know very well. That may foster some friendships for them, for the child having problems making friends, because everyone wants to be around somebody who's nice. And then again, at the end of the day, just have them share one. It could be 2 things. 2 things you learned. Oh, we learned this in math, or we learned this in reading, or we read this story, or we shared this. And then 2 possible nice things that happened, or even 1. You can make it small. Now, with my son, he talks so much, very much like me. I couldn't get him to shut up. So he would tell me 1,000 things and 1,000 other things, and I would have a headache. So I go, you know what? I'm not going to ask him today. He goes, Papa, you're not going to ask me what I did in school? Aren't you going to ask me? I said, no, not today. I'm not. But once you do that, it will, but you've got to practice it, parents. You have to be intentional about asking them what they did and saying nice things to them, and telling them that they have to say nice things back to everyone. Practice it when you go to the market. Practice it when you encounter people anywhere. Just say some nice things and model it for them. And then they'll be really happy, and they'll start to do that with other people. And hopefully the friendships, that helps the friendship question that's in the chat, and that helps the opening up. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And get back to us.
Javier.
Let us know if any of this is helpful.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
so that leads to the next question I want to ask all our families, and which is, what is one takeaway for you today? If you can please add in the Q&A, that is the form that we're using in a webinar to participate. If you can please add in the Q&A, one takeaway, what is maybe one practice that you're going to start, or maybe one commitment that you want to make, or maybe one activity that you're going to try to do today. So that would be wonderful if we can just make that commitment. And that's what research shows, that if we put it in paper, or if we put it in a chat, or we put it on we become more intentional when we write it down, when we say it. So and that's why we're asking that, I wrote it down on mine, what is one thing that I'm going to do, and I could share mine with you, which is I want to be a better listener. That's something that I hear my children say to me. Our children tell us what they need from us, and my boy says, Mom, you're not listening. So then I turn around, but I am. I am. So they tell us what they want or they need from us. So my commitment will be when I go home today, I want to be a better listener. So if you can please, and I don't know if you see in the Q&A what's coming in. I don't know if anyone, let's see, they're thanking us for ladies. Thank you for this wonderful presentation.
Somebody's going to print out a feelings poster to help their child identify their feelings. Excellent. Excellent.
That's wonderful. Okay, so thank you so
you,
much.
guys.
Thank you. So with that, we're going to go ahead and share our contact information. We are excited to have a new parent ed coach that will be supporting the downtown LA MacArthur Park. And you just heard him, Mr. Javier Contreras. You have his email address in front of you. And this is a great slide that I would recommend you take a picture. A lot of you might say, well, who do I contact? Who do I call? You have myself. I help the families at Eagle Rock Highland Park. My name's Ana Martinez. You see my email address there. We also have Cyrene Saint Amant, who supports the Glassell Park, Los Felix area. Then we have Alex Campbell that supports the Jefferson and South Central, and also the historic Central Avenue area. Then we have Ms. Lomeli, Elizabeth Lomeli, supporting the Koreatown Pico Union, and Ms. Vilma Monzon, who supports Emmanuel Arts Vermont Square. Then we also have our fantastic administrator for PACE, Ms. Teresa Arreguin, and you have her email address as well. And then our two community representatives, you also have their email address. So feel free to connect with us and shoot us an email if you have additional questions. So yes, with that, we want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you for participating. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for, we really appreciate you spending this time with us. And we thank our fantastic and wonderful consultants, our experts in the field that, just like they said, they are answering those calls in the hotline, listening to our children, listening to our families. So when they speak from experience. So I thank them for their time and their dedication to all they do to support our families. So with that, I want to also thank our translator. He's been here. Thank you so much for helping us translate. And everyone, have a wonderful rest of your evening. We'll see you next Wednesday in Tech Talks and more. Please stay safe. Have a wonderful evening. Goodbye, everyone. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Stay safe.